I've lived my whole life feeling like the extra piece in my own family, the one nobody really asked for, but everyone tolerated. And at the center of that feeling was my brother. Growing up, he was everything I wasn't. Louder, taller, smarter at least in everyone else's eyes. Teachers praised him. Relatives bragged about him. My parents trusted him without question. And me? I was the sensitive one, the one who needed to try harder, the one who was always told, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" At first, the insults were subtle, little jokes disguised as humor. "Don't give him anything important. He'll mess it up. He's just not built for pressure." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because if I didn't, I'd look weak. But as we got older, the jokes sharpened. They stopped being playful and started feeling deliberate. Every mistake I made became a story he retold. Every small success I had was minimized. When I dropped out of college, he announced it at dinner like breaking news. When I found a stable job, he called it temporary. When I stayed quiet, he took that as permission. The worst part wasn't even him, it was the silence from everyone else. No one stopped him. No one defended me. It was like they'd all silently agreed that this was my role. Still, I endured it. Because he was my brother. Because family is family. Because I kept telling myself it would get better. Then came my sister's birthday. It was supposed to be a happy day. She'd worked hard, overcome a lot. And this was the first time in years the whole family was together. The house was full of laughter, food and music. For once, I felt hopeful, like maybe this night could pass without humiliation. I was wrong. As dinner went on, my brother started drinking more than usual. I could tell by the way his voice grew louder, his jokes meaner. He kept glancing at me, that familiar smirk on his face, the one that always meant trouble. I tried to avoid eye contact, tried to stay invisible. Then he stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork, drawing everyone's attention. The room quieted. My sister smiled, thinking he was about to give a sweet speech. Instead, he looked straight at me. "Well," he said, grinning, "we're all celebrating achievements tonight. Some of us actually made something of ourselves." A few nervous laughs followed. "And then there's him," he continued, nodding toward me. "Still lost, still behind, still exactly where we all expected him to be." The laughter was louder this time. My chest tightened. My face burned. I could feel every eye in the room slide toward me, waiting for a reaction. I looked at my parents. They didn't say a word. That was the moment something inside me broke. I smiled, slowly, calmly, and in my head, I made a decision that would change everything. If he wanted to humiliate me in public, then I'd make sure his fall was unforgettable. Didn't explode that night. I didn't yell or storm out like everyone probably expected me to. Instead, I sat there, forcing my fork through food I could no longer taste, nodding along as if his words hadn't just carved something open inside my chest. That was new for me. Usually after moments like that, I'd lie awake replaying every insult, every laugh, every second of silence from the people who were supposed to care. I'd feel small, ashamed, powerless. But this time was different. This time, I felt cold. When the party ended, my sister hugged me tightly. She whispered, "I'm sorry," like she somehow blamed herself. I told her it was fine. I even smiled, but the truth was, I barely heard her. My mind was already elsewhere, replaying my brother's face when he spoke, how confident he was, how sure he felt that nothing would ever touch him. That confidence bothered me more than the insult. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I'd ignored before, patterns, cracks, little inconsistencies in the stories my brother loved to tell. He bragged constantly about his job, about how irreplaceable he was at work, about the massive deals he supposedly closed on his own. But whenever I asked simple questions, details anyone involved would know, he'd dodge them, change the subject, laugh it off. So I paid attention. I listened when he talked too much after a few drinks. I watched the way his phone never left his hand. I noticed how he'd suddenly leave the room to take work calls, how his girlfriend's name disappeared from his social media for days at a time. And slowly, the picture became clear. My brother wasn't successful. He was careful. Careful about what he showed. Careful about who knew what. Careful because the image he'd built was fragile, and deep down, he knew it. One night, completely by accident, I saw a message pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. A name I didn't recognize. A message that definitely wasn't about work. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need to. That single glance confirmed what my instincts were already screaming. He wasn't just a bully. He was a liar. From that moment on, I stopped seeing him as the unstoppable figure I'd grown up fearing. I saw him as human, flawed, reckless, and most importantly vulnerable. I began documenting everything, not obsessively, quietly, patiently. Dates. Comment. It wasn't about revenge yet. At least, that's what I told myself. But every time I remembered the laughter at my sister's birthday, every time I remembered my parents' silence, my resolve hardened. I realized something that terrified me and empowered me all at once. For years, my brother had controlled the narrative. He decided who I was. And now, I was finally in a position to tell the truth. I didn't know exactly how or when it would happen, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. It was going to be precise. And when it was over, no one would ever laugh at me again. The strange thing was, once I decided to stop reacting and start observing, everything slowed down. Time stretched. Moments that used to blur together suddenly had edges. I noticed how my brother spoke to people, not just me, but everyone. How his charm always had a sharp underside. How compliments came with conditions. How respect in his world was something taken, not earned. And the more I watched, the clearer it became. He needed an audience. At family gatherings, he always positioned himself at the center of the room. His stories grew bigger with each retelling. Promotions happened faster in his version of reality. Problems were always someone else's fault. If something went wrong, there was a convenient excuse already prepared. I started asking questions. Casual ones. Innocent ones. How did that deal actually work? Didn't your team handle that part? He'd laugh, clap my shoulder, call me overly curious, but I could see it just for a second, the flicker of irritation in his eyes. He didn't like being questioned. He liked being admired. Meanwhile, his life behind the scenes was getting messier. His girlfriend, kind, patient, way too good for him, started showing up less. When she did, they argued in hushed voices. He blamed work, stress, pressure. He always had a reason. And work was where the real cracks showed. He complained constantly about co-workers dragging him down, about bosses who didn't understand his value, about how the company would collapse without him. Yet somehow, he was always anxious, always checking his email, always tense when his phone buzzed late at night. They don't know half of what I do, he said, shaking his head. If they ever looked too closely, they'd freak out. He laughed after saying it, like it was a joke. I didn't. That sentence stayed with me, echoed in my head during quiet moments. Because people who are truly secure don't talk like that. They don't fear scrutiny. I began connecting dots, cross-checking stories with what little information I had access to. Public posts, office announcements, casual comments from mutual acquaintances. Slowly, a pattern emerged, one that didn't look like confidence at all. It looked like deception layered on top of luck. And then there was the disrespect. Even after the birthday incident, he didn't stop. If anything, he doubled down. Little remarks slipped into conversations like knives hidden in smiles. At least you're consistent. Not everyone's meant to succeed. Each time, the room laughed. Each time, I stayed calm. Because what they didn't see was what those moments were doing to me. They weren't hurting anymore. They were motivating. I wasn't trying to beat him at his own game. I wasn't trying to humiliate him the way he humiliated me. That kind of revenge was cheap, temporary. No, I wanted something deeper. I wanted him to face the truth with the same audience he'd always used against me. And by then, I was almost ready. All I needed was the right moment. The right moment arrived sooner than I expected. My brother started talking about a promotion. Not quietly, never quietly. He announced it at family dinners, hinted at it in group chats, and made sure everyone knew his boss was basically grooming him for leadership. My parents beamed with pride. Relatives congratulated him in advance. And me? I listened, carefully, because while he was busy celebrating a future that wasn't guaranteed, I was uncovering a past he'd buried poorly. I learned that the solo wins he bragged about were team projects, that numbers he claimed as his own had been inflated, that a co-worker, someone who trusted him, had taken the blame when one of his deals almost collapsed. And the more I learned, the more obvious it became. My brother wasn't just exaggerating. He was skating dangerously close to fraud. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge, I realized, is about timing. Strike too early and you look bitter. Strike too late and the moment loses its weight. I needed him at his highest point, when his confidence was untouchable and his guard completely down. That moment came when he invited everyone over to celebrate. He called it a pre-promotion dinner, said it with a grin, like the outcome was already decided. He even invited a few co-workers, important ones, the kind of people whose opinions mattered. The house buzzed with energy that night. Laughter, music, the smell of expensive food. My brother moved through the room like a king, accepting praise, telling stories, soaking it all in. And every time our eyes met, he smiled at me with that same old look, the one that said, "I'm still above you." Not because I was nervous, but because I was ready. I waited until dessert, until everyone was relaxed, until phones were out, conversations overlapping, attention scattered but present. Then I stood up. The room quieted, just like it had on my sister's birthday. Funny how life circles back like that. I just wanted to say something. I began, keeping my voice steady, about honesty and success. My brother chuckled. "Careful," he said. "This should be good." I nodded. "Yeah," I replied. "It will be." I connected my phone to the TV. The screen lit up. A timeline. Clean, organized, impossible to misunderstand. Emails, reports, messages, dates. The room went silent, not awkward this time. Heavy. My brother's smile faded. He stepped toward me, whispering, "Turn that off." I looked at him calmly. "You had years to stop." His co-workers stared at the screen. One of them muttered, "That's not possible." Another said, "Those numbers don't add up." My parents didn't say a word. They just watched, finally seeing what I'd seen all along. My brother tried to laugh it off, tried to spin it, but lies collapse when exposed to light. And this was just the beginning. As the room filled with whispers and disbelief, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not anger, not satisfaction, control. And for the first time in my life, my brother knew it too. The fallout didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about real consequences, they don't explode, they spread. The night of the dinner ended in chaos. Co-workers left early, whispering into their phones. My brother locked himself in his bedroom, pacing like a trapped animal. My parents sat in silence long after everyone was gone, staring at the dark TV screen as if it might explain where they went wrong. No one yelled at me. No one defended him. That silence was louder than any insult I'd ever endured. Over the next few weeks, the truth finished what I'd started. His company launched an internal review, then an external one. The almost promotion quietly disappeared from conversation. Meetings were cancelled. Emails stopped coming. His confident strut turned into nervous pacing, his phone buzzing constantly with messages that no longer sounded friendly. One evening, he knocked on my door, not barged in, not joked, knocked. I barely recognized him standing there. His shoulders were slumped, his voice shaky. "Why didn't you come to me first?" he asked. "We're family." I studied his face, the same face that had looked down on me for years. "I was family when you mocked me," I said calmly. "You just didn't care." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. 2 days later, he was fired. Official reason, misconduct. Unofficial reason, everyone knew he couldn't be trusted. His girlfriend left shortly after, said she didn't know who he really was anymore. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. And me? Something strange happened. My parents started asking my opinion. Relatives listened when I spoke. My sister hugged me one night and said, "I'm proud of you. Not for what I did, but for finally standing up." I didn't feel joy watching my brother fall. Not the kind people imagine anyway. What I felt was lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight for years without realizing it. And suddenly, it was gone. One afternoon, weeks later, I ran into him at a grocery store. He avoided my eyes. No jokes. No comments. No smirk. just quiet. That was when I understood the real revenge wasn't exposing him. It was this. The power he once had over me was gone. I walked past him, head high, heart steady, knowing something he never expected. I didn't need to be louder than him. I didn't need to be cruel. I just needed the truth. And from that day on, no one ever laughed at me again.